The world can make you tired. It can make you weary. It can break you down. It can put people in despondent states. And how does it do this? Well, it happens through the mind setting forth desires, and then the chase for these desires, and the inability to fulfill the mind's desires. And this constant struggle to fulfill the mind's desires brings upon difficulty for the person involved in the process. So, what's the answer to that? Well, it's not complicated if you give a little thought. Detach from the onslaught of desire, because they don't stop. So, the hallucinating desire factory that is the mind is like a train station. Every time one train leaves the train station, another train going in a different place comes in, and you can't catch all the trains. You can't go in every direction. You can't be everywhere. You can't fulfill all of the things that your mind thinks of. And because you somehow begin to think that you should, or that you can, or that you don't think at all but just chase, it leads to weariness. And it leads to feelings of inferiority. It leads to feelings of not doing as much as we can. It leads to a state of internal poverty, because we associate wealth with what we have and what we've accomplished. Somehow, somewhere along our path, we have to realize that peace is wealth. That these things that we don't see, but that can become part of us, are in fact wealth. And they are a much greater wealth than any of the mind desires that are created that we chase after. And, by the way, those who've conquered a lot of their mind desires, those who've gotten a lot of the things that the mind hallucinates because somehow they're adept at it, or through circumstances they've become wealthy enough to do whatever they want, they end up in the same place as the person who can't get those things, because there's no satisfaction in those things when you get them. They're not capable of giving the desired results. The mind will say, if you get this, you will find peace. Lie. And that is the point of the great liar. He sets up an illustration, he gives you a scenario, and he says, do this, and then this will happen. Lie. And if we don't see the lie, then we get caught in the scenario, we get caught in the scene, and we get caught in the chase. And it's only when we begin to realize where we can go and the way to go there that we can find a way to get that peace we're looking for. Of the tens of thousands of trains that go through the station, only one can take you to the right location. And you have to know what time that train comes, and you have to be ready to get on that train. And that is the train of God's qualities. All the other trains are incapable of taking you where it is you want to be. The mind also has a way of destroying purity, of destroying the ability to go to the qualities that are Allah's. A relationship between man and a woman is an amazing thing. It's something that can lead to unconditional love. And I gave a talk about this recently. And afterwards, a woman came up to me and said, my boyfriend and I talk about unconditional love. And I told him I want a relationship that involves fidelity. And he said he wants a relationship that's open. And if I loved him unconditionally, I would accept his request. And I looked at her and I said, that's not a condition. That's a violation of the law. And his mind, through its desire, has made it into something that falls into unconditional love. It's a lie. And she began to laugh. And laugh really loudly because she never got it before. He had confused the bejesus out of her. And she was almost beginning to buy it. But in her gut, she knew it was wrong, and she didn't understand why. So, if we're going to play with love, and if we're going to play with relationships, and if we're going to be involved in interactions with each other, we first have to have a foundation in the law. We have to know what's right and wrong. And we have to do what's right. And then love is built on the law. It isn't out there all by itself. It isn't out there in a space without prerequisites. It's out there in combination with appropriate behavior. So until we reach the level of appropriate worldly behavior, until we've purified our gross behavior and brought it down to a point where it's in line with what's allowed, we can't go to the higher levels. It's not possible because we made our own rules. And when we make our own rules, where do they come from? They come from the mind. People have this hallucination that whatever they think is their conscience. And if they follow their conscience, they'll be able to do what's right. Well, people have a very low standard of what a conscience is. And people are not really in touch with conscience, and they have a very high imagination of who they are. People believe they're doing things from conscience before they know what's right and wrong. It's not possible. Yet, the mind will tell you that you are a man of conscience. You don't need anybody to supervise you. You don't need to supervise yourself. You wouldn't do anything that's wrong because you've reached this level of perfected conscience. Again, it's the whisperer telling you to continue on the wrong train. And we somehow have to catch that. If we can't be self-critical, if we can't watch ourselves and catch ourselves on a daily, hourly, minute, second basis, we are going to run amok. A society that isn't self-critical is a society that's going to run amok. A religion that isn't self-critical is a religion that's going to run amok. An individual who isn't self-critical is an individual who's going to run amok. So somehow we have to grasp the reins of what we're doing and check which way we're going and how we are in relationship to the law every moment. How we are in relationship to love every moment. How we are in relationship to anger and resentment and jealousy every moment. And we have to do this with a critical eye that can see who and what we are in truth, not through the mind's rose lens, which colors everything in our favor. In the same way that we have to be able to apply God's justice towards others, and impartiality towards others, and see things clear about others, we have to be able to apply that same justice towards ourself and see ourself clearly and keep ourself within check. Your freedom happens because you are bound by the law. When you are bound by the law, you can then take the steps towards love and mercy and compassion. Love without justice isn't love. Love without self-motive isn't love. The kind of love that has self-motive is the kind of love that makes you crazy. If you love the things in the world, you're back into the war of desire. Love is confused by desire. And we're in love. Why? Because we want to satisfy certain lusts. We don't love for the sake of Allah. We love for the sake of our desire. And the confusion between loving for the sake of desire and loving for the sake of justice and loving for the sake of truth is vast. And unless we can cross that chasm, we fall into that valley of falsehood where we do things for all the inappropriate reasons, even though we think our intentions are right. And that's why so many people need supervision by a master. Because the master can explain when you've gone astray. The master can right you once again. And we all need to be righted. We all need to be put on the straight, correct path. And unless we can do that, we are going to be constantly getting on trains that go to places that we don't want to be, that we don't need to be. And this can go on for years. We can be after a certain goal for a multitude of years and not realize that this goal is without purpose and without need until we've gotten close to reaching it. We need to know where the real wealth is. And we need to know what the real wealth is. And wealth is not necessarily things that can be seen by the eyes or touched. Wealth is the fact that your friends can look at you with kindness because they appreciate your being. Wealth is the fact that you can look at your friends with kindness because you appreciate their being. Wealth is the fact that you have no barriers between yourselves and others, and you can move through this world without resentment, without anger, without jealousy, without all the things that pin us next to Satan, that put us in a place next to the accursed one, because he's constantly fuming about these things and giving them some kind of an appropriate nature, making us think that they're somehow allowed to be and allowed to happen. Imagine spending a day without any negative thoughts. Imagine going through an entire day where everything you encounter you see as Allah's will and you're able to accept it. Imagine going through a day where everything that you have done follows the precepts of the law. Well, if you can imagine a day, then you can imagine 2 days. And then you can imagine a week. Some of us have to start with imagining an hour. We have set ourselves up into patterns that are repetitive. And if these patterns have gone astray, they will continue to go astray until we make some kind of active effort to alter them. And effort is difficult. It's easy to fall down. It's hard to get up. Everything takes effort. If you want to conquer a tree, if you want to climb it, and you want to get a coconut from it, you have to belly up to it, you have to go one bit at a time, trying to climb up it with your chest against the tree. When we have a difficulty, we have to encircle it. We have to understand it. And we have to subdue it. And we have to do away with it. And it's going to take effort. We know what our difficulties are. The alcoholic knows that he shouldn't drink. The drug addict knows that he shouldn't take drugs. The philanderer knows that he shouldn't chase women. The gambler knows that he shouldn't gamble. There are so many examples of what we do. Some on the outside, some on the inside. We all know that when we meet people, we should give them the benefit of the doubt as opposed to immediately placing them in an inferior position to us. Can we do that? Somebody was sitting in front of Bawa and asked him some questions about himself. And he said, if I told you all of the things that you want to know about yourself, I would then have to protect myself from you. But that doesn't make me any better than you. So Bawa was able to accept somebody who was full of fault and not have a superiority complex over that person, because that was and is Bawa's nature. Can that be our nature? Can a person who is less than us in some measure of the world be treated by us in the same way as somebody who's more than us in some measure of the world? I've seen people who were around people who were wealthier than them walk with their head down and always say very polite and appropriate things, yet when they're in a restaurant with a waitress, they are constantly screaming and carrying on about that person. They have this phenomenon of high and low, and they're constantly trying, obviously, to take themselves higher and higher. But why? Because they get some kind of enjoyment out of being able to suppress those below them, or at least those they think are below them. Some people enjoy other people's problems. There's even a word for it in German, Schadenfreude, which, if you translate the word, it means happiness because of the shadows of others. All of these things go on, but we were told, feel others' pain and feel others' joy. So if somebody's joyous, we participate in that joy. Imagine how fortunate you are if you're capable of participating in other people's joy. It gives you all of these opportunities to be joyous. It gives you all of these opportunities to be elevated. We have to find an equanimity in ourselves that resides and is centered in the law and in the qualities of Allah. And when we find that repose, then we can move without the weariness that the world puts upon people, because we're not attached to it, because it doesn't put us through the grinder. If every time you go out there you need something, you have to be very careful. To grab a rose, you got to go through the thorns. And the mind has created millions of different roses, and each of them have thousands of thorns surrounding them. There's a place that doesn't have thorns. There's a place that's truth, and we have to look for that place. We have to find the place that is welcoming to us, but understand that it can't be welcoming to us until we are welcoming to it. So, if you want mercy, you have to be merciful. If you want compassion, you have to be compassionate. If you want love, you have to be lovable. You have to be lovely. If you want arrogance, be arrogant. There's this great reciprocity in things. We get back what we put out on a steady basis. And just because we think we're putting out compassion, it doesn't mean we are. So we have to be able to truly witness what's going on, and not just be able to see the faults of others, but be able to see the faults of ourselves. Everybody can sit around and talk about everybody else's problems, everybody else's difficulties. Can we sit around with ourselves and talk about our problems and our difficulties? Or is it too hard for us? Have we become so enamored through the narcissism of the self that we can't handle the stings of criticism? And this criticism that comes from others is not what we need. We need the criticism that comes from ourself, because it's ourself who's going to make that change. Others can criticize all they want. Until we decide that we're going to take on and make those changes, nothing will occur. So, slowly, we have to pull ourselves away from the mind's desires. And in that pulling away from the mind's desires, we can then go to the soul's desires, to the heart's desires. And they are an entirely different set of needs. The mind needs what it desires. The heart needs what it desires. So desire that can destroy our life can be turned around into a desire that can elevate our life. We just have to start wanting the right things. And we have to know what it is we have to do in order to want the right things. We have to start understanding the way towards the right things. May Allah make that easy for each of us. May He give us the determination and the strength to make the effort to do what needs to be done to bring us to the place where we desire Him and do what's necessary to bring ourselves towards Him. And what we have to understand is that the biggest thing that we have to do is become detached and purified from the magnetisms and the hypnotisms and the illusions that are the world, to understand that the true wealth is His, not the things